Do you want to take attendance?
Sure.
Okay.
Cindy Buck? No. Wendy Clark? Here. Heidi will not be here today. Kylie Goslin?
Hey,
Here.
Wendy.
Steve Kitowitz?
Here.
Gayla Mascara-Bruno?
Here.
Lisa Tepper-Bates? Here. And Greg Ugalde?
Here.
Thank you. Thank you, Shelley. Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone had a good month, although it went really quick. I just look at my calendar. Oh, my gosh, I have another board meeting. Anyway, we have, I think, a short agenda, but we're going to have a good conversation in one of the items. So, Colette, are you going to present the first project, the finance of Barnum House?
Yes. Good morning.
Good morning.
So this is a board action to approve the prepayment of 2 CHFA taxable bond loans, one with an approximate payoff of $104,000, and this is a loan that originated in 1980 and matures in 2051. The second loan has approximate payoff of $4,168,000. It originated in 2010 and matures in 2041. We are also asking the board to approve tax-exempt bond proceeds for a permanent first mortgage loan of up to $9.3 million, a maximum term of up to 40 years, and an interest rate of 4.5%. To Barnum House Preservation LP, this is an affiliate of the Related Companies, who is the developer. This is an existing 13-story historic building built in 1927, excuse me, located in Bridgeport. There are 83 studio and 1-bedroom units and 1 staff unit. New project space, Section 8 contract serving an elderly population of 62 years of age and older at or below 50% of the area median income is planned with the transaction. The current owner, Barnum House Associates LP, has no affiliation with the proposed mortgagor. There are 3 existing commercial suites on the ground floor. All 3 commercial leases are in place through the end of 2021. Business has slowed for these businesses during COVID. However, they don't expect to lose any tenants, and we did not include commercial income as part of the pro forma. There's a community room, library, fitness room, and a common area laundry room. Distributions from cash flow are proposed to be based on the requirements associated with the markup to market renewal option with HUD's Section 8 contract. This option allows for 100% of surplus cash at year end for owner distribution. If the Section 8 contract expires or if they fail to renew, CHFA's distribution limitation of 10% of owner equity will apply. The renovations will take approximately 10 months, and the proposed scope includes kitchen and flooring replacements, bathroom upgrades, addition of a new on-site superintendent unit, 100% window replacement, structural work, including facade and roof replacement, ADA accessibility compliance work, landscape improvements, parking lot repairs and sealing, common area upgrades, and enhancements to the security system. The high cost is largely attributable to the cost to acquire the property at $6.6 million. There's a moderate scope of work of approximately $5,774,000, and the hard cost per unit amount is approximately $63,000. CHFA Technical Services has verified that the 2010 scope of work completed as part of CHFA's bond loan was minor in nature, and that the current scope of work addresses major items such as roof replacement and masonry repairs and does not duplicate the work from 2010. With regards to the development team capacity and track record, the developer is an affiliate of the related companies, and they primarily acquire, recapitalize, rehabilitate, and preserve existing low and moderate income properties around the country. And they own a portfolio of over $30 billion around the globe. With regards to loans that they have with CHFA, there's a table provided. We have 4 additional properties in our portfolio with this group, and with 5 loans with a balance of approximately $35 million. Related Companies is also the former owner of Ninth Square. The financial restructuring of this deal did not occur as timely as projected after the end of the initial LIHTC compliance period and the expiration of the tax abatement. The project NOI was not sufficient to meet the debt obligation, and Related worked with various stakeholders, including CHFA, to develop an effective workout to stabilize the project and subsequently sell it. In 2017, the parties executed a forbearance agreement, and the property was subsequently sold in May of 2019 to Beacon Communities. St. Maurice is another property that's in our portfolio. It's currently listed on CHFA's sustainability list for a low debt service coverage ratio. Payments are being made on this loan, and it is current. The property was acquired from the Catholic Archdiocese of Bridgeport in 2017. The annual debt service burden is very high. However, the owner is committed to funding any necessary shortfalls, and the loan will mature in September of 21 and has a current balance of less than $125,000. Related is currently formulating a business plan for this property and are considering conventional financing, selling the property, or refinancing it as a new LIHTC transaction. Private Construction is the selected general contractor, and they have completed a number of successful projects throughout the state, and they are well versed in working in occupied spaces, which was a key selection criteria for this project. The architectural team is the selected architectural firm and has worked throughout Connecticut on various CHFA projects. Related Management Company, they are the proposed manager. They manage approximately 24,000 units, affordable units for Related, and they manage their market rate portfolio as well. They also manage 3 properties in CHFA's portfolio, and they are currently in LIHTC compliance and have no outstanding issues. The team presents a potential credit risk due to the total number and amount of the CHFA loans. However, nearly all the loans have Section 8 HUD contracts, so non-performing on those contracts would jeopardize their relationship with HUD or could even possibly get them debarred. The project is centrally located and allows senior residents to walk to local shops, pharmacies, restaurants, and grocery stores. There is a transit authority bus stop within approximately 300 feet of the building. Bridgeport Hospital is 2 miles away. The total development cost is estimated at $17,228,000, and the TDC per unit amount is estimated to be approximately $205,000. Hard cost per unit is $63,000. In addition to the CHFA TEB loan, there will be LIHTC equity of approximately $5.7 million. There will also be Regions Affordable will also be providing an equity bridge loan for that. There are federal historic tax credits of approximately $1.2 million, state historic tax credits of approximately $1.2 million, energy rebates, and a deferred developer fee. As I mentioned, they are planning to renew and extend the existing 20-year project-based Section 8 contract for all units. Temporary relocation is planned for and budgeted for. There will be no permanent relocation. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the contractor will thoroughly disinfect the units with appropriate cleaning materials prior to the tenant's return. The strengths of this project include that we'll be preserving an existing 83-unit affordable elderly housing project that's nearly 100% occupancy. It'll improve the physical condition of the property, and DOH resources are not contemplated. The development team has a proven track record of successfully developing and managing properties in our portfolio that are financed with LIHTC. Plans and specs, the capital needs assessment, and the environmental reports have all been reviewed by CHFA Tech Services and deemed acceptable. With regards to the challenges, the developer's purchase and sale agreement stipulates a closing by the end of March, and the project includes temporary relocation of residents during the pandemic. So this introduces additional challenges and will require additional protocols. Due to the age and the unique historic architecture of the building, there is a potential that more damage exists in the roof and masonry work that was originally anticipated and budgeted for. The mitigating factors include, with regards to the closing at the end of March, we are working with an experienced development team, and we just recently closed Market Square with them, and we'll be utilizing the same internal team to help them close this deal as well. We have also started collecting due diligence items for this closing. With regards to the pandemic, Related has assembled a task force and formulated a response plan for renovation sites, and that includes contractor awareness, access control protocols like temperature screenings and signage, PPE, social distancing, site cleaning, and housekeeping. In order to mitigate any unanticipated costs, we do have a construction contingency line item of nearly $500,000 that's been budgeted for. In addition to our standard closing conditions, HUD approval of the transfer of the asset, as well as the assignment and assumption of the HAF will need to be finalized, and the approval of the new 20-year Section 8 contract. Any questions?
How long ago did they get the quote for materials and to get the improvements done? The reason why I ask is that lumber prices are fluctuating so much. With a March closing, I'm just wondering how sensitive the materials are in this quote.
Mm-hmm. I believe we're in good shape because, like I said, we have started closing calls with them, so we're finalizing the contract with the GC. We also, this project was impacted by the increase to the 4% applicable percentage rate, so they were able to increase the scope of work related to that, so everything had to be addressed again at that point, and that wasn't terribly long ago. So I believe we're in pretty good shape. I can discuss it again with our tech services, but at this point we really are collecting due diligence for closing and have those things finalized.
And there's really not too much we can do with it other than try to find the best possible way, one, to ensure delivery of materials, but also to afford them. I mean, we're talking about 170% increase just over the last 12 months. So it's just significant whenever you look at work being done, whether it's improvements or new construction.
Okay.
Yes, this is Kylie. I have a question that's along the same lines as Greg. Just noting that, you know, we're already at a relatively, what seems like a relatively high rehab rate at $200K plus per unit here. Understand, however, that the historic components of the building, the location and all that are important, and I'm in favor of preserving the units that we've got. But concerned, given the condition issues that you cited with the age of the building, particularly the roof and the masonry, noting Greg's concerns about fluctuations in materials costs, as to whether that 8.4% construction contingency is sufficient, and whether there was any consideration or thought among the CHFA staff about trying to bump that up a little bit, possibly to 10%, given what's in the market right now.
We can
question, or maybe that's a misplaced question, but it looks like there's a lot of potential reasons why costs here could be different than what we're anticipating.
It certainly doesn't sound like this is their first rodeo either. At the same time, though, depending on how recently they've been subjected to the increases that we're seeing, that's a great point, Kylie. And I'm not sure how flexible this is either, but it does seem like it's a fairly good question to ask.
Yeah, we can absolutely have that conversation with them. I know that our tech folks have gone pretty far down the road with these, with their reviews, and that we've been in close communication with CHFA as well. We have that Part 2 conditional approval. But we can certainly revisit the size of the contingency with the development team.
I'll chime in as well. This is Jennifer Landau. I'm one of the directors in multifamily. Another idea is we can certainly reach out to the development team and perhaps suggest that they do some limited investigations of the roof to see if there is more widespread damage. That would give us an indication, going forward if we, need to increase the hard cost contingency before closing.
One of the statements was that they're prepared to embrace any of the over costs, anything that's over budget. Would that include I couldn't really follow if it included all the improvements that needed to be made too. Are they in a position? It looks like they're pretty experienced. I'm wondering if they do always expect. It's just that this is an interesting headwind that we face right now with all of those factors, the roof being a bit unknown, the materials, and so on. But that would be, I guess, and I'm certainly in favor of this. I think it's well thought out, and there's a lot of homework that went into it. But it's just that, we're the last set of eyes to be looking at it, all of us. So maybe we can just mention that in the write-up for sure.
Can I add one more thing? So Colette, it looks like they're deferring very little fee, right? Does that give us any kind of cushion to the extent there are overruns? Being a way that you can manage that exposure?
Absolutely. Yeah, we could, if costs did increase, that would be another relief that we could look to do. Is if the development costs increase, we could defer more fee.
We could also look into seeing if there's any way they could lock in the prices since they're trying to initial close pretty quickly. Perhaps there's a way they can lock in some of, today's costs for the lumber, again, to kind of hedge against any potential cost increases. That could be something we could look into.
And at least you would know they're skyrocketing at the moment, but it doesn't look like we're going to see any dramatic decreases. So knowing is half the battle if you can build it in properly.
Any other questions before we move on?
I have a question on relocation. As part of our diligence, do we take a close look at the relocation plan, and are we satisfied with it?
Absolutely. We've we reviewed it preliminarily. It will also get reviewed as part of the closing due diligence. We've done a couple similar deals with these guys, so we've gone through it on previous deals as well. And so any kind of questions I'm assuming, will carry over into this one as well, as we've kind of hammered out that plan with them.
And in that work, do we solicit any inputs from the locality? Not really specific to this project, but generally.
And what, I guess I don't know what you mean.
So city hall, any other stakeholders locally, when you move forward in projects like this, do we talk to anyone locally?
Well, I mean, the development team is on the ground talking to the city about permits and things like that. I'm not aware of any specific community groups that they've talked about, especially since this is an existing project and they'll just be upgrading it. I'm not aware of any other community groups that they've worked with.
Thank you.
Are we in a position, would you entertain a motion at this point?
If there are any other questions? Okay, yes.
I'll make a motion that we approve, noting the comments that were made, the concerns and the conversations that will take place.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Steve. Shelley, could you take a roll?
Sure. Cindy Buck?
Roll call.
Not sure if she joined. It doesn't look like it. Wendy Clark?
Yes.
Kylie Goslin?
Yes.
Steve Kitowitz?
Yes.
Salem Mascara-Bruno?
Yes.
Lisa Tepper-Bates?
Yes.
Greg Ugalde?
Yes.
Unanimous?
Motion carries. I have a question for the members of the committee. We have talked this in the past that if we want to, if the committee, I mean, you guys have good questions about different projects, but usually when it comes to this meeting, it's kind of the end, and whatever comments you have is just noted, but we can't make any decisions. We don't want to stop the projects from moving forward, but would it make sense to have these projects to come to a committee like when they are in the works, and then we know that in the following meeting those are going to be approved because we made the comments before it's ready to be presented to the board?
That would be helpful.
For the background noise, I agree on that front, Commissioner. When I was on the CRDA board, that's something we routinely did, was talk about a project sort of earlier in the process, and then as that project progressed, we got periodic monthly updates. So by the time the project got to a point where we were voting on financing, you know, there had been several meetings and the group was a little more familiar. And I think, to your point, it gives a chance to ask questions like the ones Greg and I were raising, you know, earlier, and maybe that ultimately doesn't make a difference in what the financing looks like or where that contingency, for example, looks like at the end of the day, but it allows, I think, the committee to feel a level of comfort when they do make that vote that maybe we don't exactly have right now.
So, Anthony, do you see any problem doing that? An hour is not a lot, and we are almost halfway there, and we have a couple of other items. But talking about projects that are going to move ahead, can we get like the next two projects that people are working on, and they might be ready within the next couple of months, but next month we'll go over those projects so that they can finalize their underwriting?
I have a couple of thoughts. I guess one of them is, you know, I don't know to the extent how much information we'll have available to discuss like 2 to 3 months before it's ready for board. These tend to be baked and come together very quickly. There's not a long incubation period. I'm not trying to make excuses here. I'm just trying to think through, you know, the value of bringing something that's really not ready to be discussed. But so I'd have to think about that. I'm trying to sort of figure out how this would work because, you know, I'll be very honest with you. I mean, I think the tendency has been for some of this work to happen right before it comes to board because we're always scrambling to get the information ready. Whether that's discipline we need to rebuild, I mean, that's a good point, right? We have to figure out how to get the development community to be reactive and proactive, I should say, and responsive to requests for information, but yet some of that is going to be a work in progress. So I just want to think about that a little bit in terms of timing, structure, challenges with providing information that's not quite ready. How do we manage those expectations? So let me think about it with Masuda a little bit. I'll come back to you.
Yeah, this is Masuda. If I can also go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, sorry. Yeah, I want to return to Kylie's comment, which is that it sounds like CRDA has a way they're doing this, and it might be worthwhile, Nandini, if you touch base with them just to have that discussion. That's probably something you already thought of, but if they've found a formula, it might help us to know what that is.
I think the CRDA projects tend to have a much longer incubation period.
And,
so they tend to be deals that are more unorthodox, right? Because it's meant to be a gap filler at the end, whereas these are a lot more formulaic. That being said, one of the other ways they do that is they have committees like we all do, the mortgage committee and the finance committee. They have a housing committee, and I mean they do everything from, as you all know, stadiums to housing and a bunch of other weird things. So sometimes it takes a while to get the board familiar with a totally new type of concept because you're dealing with a totally different animal every time. But The committees are where those projects are discussed sort of as they're coming up. And so maybe that's sort of a way to hash this is we reserve a portion of the mortgage committee meeting for a preview of what may be teed up next session or next month. And it's only a 1 month. And then, we could sort of have a brief conversation about the project, what it looks like and the strengths and weaknesses at that point, raise any concerns and expect that we're going to see it the following month, but not do the same thing at board meeting. In other words, reserve that sort of preview conversation for these committee discussions.
I have another idea. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. So the stuff we're talking about that tends to be, stuff that we want to weigh with the board are like policy discussions, right? I mean, they may be things around like tenant relocation or preservation in certain areas of the state, kind of where do we locate new units, costs. Like there could be topics that are rich for discussion with the board that may not get to the level of each development, because each development is going to have its own set of facts. And we want to be able to implement policy, right? We want to be able to take what you're saying into consideration as restructuring deals. I just think there may be a better way to do it as opposed to bringing every deal forward as it's being put together. But I'll think about it, and Masuda and I will definitely talk about it.
Attached to our agenda is you have that list of the things that are coming. They're going to be coming up. Maybe just add some meat to those so that any issues could be highlighted as you just like the issues you just discussed. Yeah.
That's a possibility.
Well, I think the other thing is that CRDA has a meeting. The housing committee is 2 weeks before the board meeting. So if there are things that comments or the staff needs to do a little more homework, there is that time. With CHFA, we have the same an hour before the board meeting, which is always has been kind of problematic for me. That the board members is just, if you take it and then we're going to approve it, kind of, and that's not what we want to do. We want to make sure that
of course.
So that's another option is, do we want to have this committee before the board meeting, a week before? And we have talked about that previously, and some people pushed for having it the same day of the board. And so that's another option that we could have.
Madam Chair, I really very much support that. And I think part of the pushback in previous discussions was based on the fact that everyone was driving to Rocky Hill. And people didn't want to drive twice, frankly. And we're in a very different world the way we're organizing. My hope is that we'll continue to use the opportunity of participating by Zoom for those maybe who it's onerous to drive to Rocky Hill twice. But I think that's a great idea to have that gap of a week or 2 weeks. And it would be really helpful with regard to everything we're discussing here.
Yes, so if the members agree, so we can have our meeting maybe 2 weeks before the board meeting. And in that way, if there are things that the board feels that needs to be worked out or need a little more information, then the staff has time. That when it comes to the board is for approval.
This is Masuda, and if I can just quickly add to the conversation, to provide mortgage committee some comfort, in the last several months, we have instituted additional internal committees. We have a pre-credit committee, which is a cross-functional team consisting of finance, legal, research, and our marketing and research team, as well as multifamily. We also have a credit committee that looks at these deals. So we want to make sure that transactions are fully vetted internally before they're recommended to mortgage committee. And there have been situations where we've tabled a deal because, there were maybe not enough information, or we had concerns about the budget or other issues where we do reserve that discussion. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that by the time these deals come to mortgage committee, we're fairly confident and comfortable that the plan of finance is solid, that we're recommending approval.
That would be very helpful if we even had a primer or refresher on those topics. Maybe a couple minutes on the in the committee meeting just on how things are set up, what reviews they went through. You know, even if we break it up into pieces so that it's not just boot camp, but because these are great things to know. And it's also helpful as people are inquiring as to the backstops that are out there and the things that we're doing for preventive, but also looking forward to innovative ways that we're trying to help the state. So I think that's very helpful information to share.
Okay, thank you, Greg. So, and I will talk to Masuda and Anjali and come up with, and now that we know some of the thoughts that you have, you're not opposing to have a meeting before the board meeting so we can have a little more robust conversation. Moving on, is okay with all of you. We have Terry, you're going to present the renewal of the TA for the Rural and Suburban Affordable Housing Program.
Yes, thank you, and good morning, everyone. I want to be mindful of the agenda items that follow me, so I will be very brief. You have before you a recommendation to extend the agreement with the Local Initiative Support Corporation, or LISC, for CHFA Suburban and Rural Affordable Housing Technical Assistance Program for an additional year. Through this program, LISC has fostered the development of about 1,189 units, including 622 units that are in various stages of development. They additionally provide organizational assistance, establishing new housing groups. For example, last year, Homes for Brantford in Brantford was established. They provide policy and planning assistance and project development assistance to a myriad of towns. You'll see in the memo that was provided from Avon, Chaplin, Coventry, Falls Village, Goshen, a lot of very suburban towns. There is also a map of activity attached to your memo for additional information on where activities have occurred. Since its inception, program funds have made possible assistance to 101 organizations and leveraged $111 million in development funding. The extension of the agreement will be for a period of 1 year, beginning on February 26, 21, and ending on February 26, 22. Compensation for the administration of the program will be a total of $250,000, as has been in the past, to be drawn from existing recycled Community Investment Act funds. LISC has successfully administered this program, increasing affordable housing development in suburban and rural communities throughout the state. And the program administered by LISC helps to support CHFA's mission and strategic plan. Resolution to extend the agreement for this program is requested and recommended.
Thank you, Terry. Any questions?
I'd like to just speak in favor of this program. I have worked off and on with the Economic Development Commission in my town of Stonington. And in a conversation, I'm really pleased actually that they have actually embraced the mission of looking at affordable housing as an important piece of an economic development strategy. And one of the questions that they actually brought to me and asked for our help on was this very question of what's out there to help, especially with preservation in these more rural communities that are not as well resourced with regard to technical assistance. And LISC was really the only resource like this that exists in the state, at least that I was able to point them toward. And you see in the memo that Stonington is listed as one of their partners. So I just want to really speak in favor of this. I think it's a relatively modest investment, and it fills an important gap. So thanks, Terry, for bringing it back to us.
Thank you.
Are there any plans, like I noticed that there's some white even in the northern Hartford County areas, right? If you go Granby, Canton, Burlington, Harwinton, Farmington, are there any plans to fill some of those areas in?
Yes, there's still lots of opportunity, and we've asked that the program be expanded to the extent possible. LISC will do some proactive outreach to towns that it is not serving, including suburban communities in Fairfield, Hartford, and New Haven counties. You'll notice they're heavily in Litchfield County. We've also asked them to be
Right.
particularly mindful of state investments so that they'll support particularly DOH's investment in planning grants in a lot of these towns.
This is great.
Okay. Thank you, Terry. May I have a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Shelley?
Wendy Clark,
Yes.
Kylie Goslin,
Yes.
Keith Hidowitz,
Yes.
Sayla Mascara-Bruno,
Yes.
Lisa Tepper-Bates,
Yes.
Greg Dugaldi.
Yes.
Unanimous?
Motion carries. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the proposed policy statement for preservation of affordable housing. And Mastura, you're going to present the statement?
Yes, I will. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of Mortgage Committee. I'm pleased to present proposed revisions to CHFA's preservation of housing affordability policy that was last revised back in 2017, and solicit your input as the policy is formalized for board approval at the March meeting. By way of background, the strategic capital adequacy study that was done by CSG back in October recommended that CHFA consider adopting a prepayment and preservation strategy for seasoned multifamily loans. Additionally, one of the initiatives that we have in the strategic plan for this year is preservation of affordable housing, including a refinance and prepayment of multifamily seasoned loans. And as you can see, some of the recent transactions that have been brought to the board are preservation transactions where we are looking at refinancing these existing mortgages. So with the aging portfolio and the desire to ensure the long-term financial and physical health of these properties, we conducted an analysis of CHFA's loan portfolio. We also researched other states to identify best practices that could be embedded in this proposed policy. In the analysis, we identified properties that are in the portfolio who would be a good candidate for a refinance. And again, some of those transactions you have seen that have come through in the last few months. Additionally, in researching other states, we were able to identify best practices that were embedded in the preservation guidelines, which will be an internal set of guidelines that multifamily staff will be using once this policy is in place. So I'm going to just take a few minutes to highlight some of the key changes that are being proposed. First, this proposed policy will formalize the prepayment parameters and provide framework for preserving the long-term affordability of CHFA's loan portfolio. As you're aware, the board has approved prepayment requests in the past, and the current process for allowing prepayment is ad hoc. Formalizing the prepayment parameters will result in transparency and clarity not only for CHFA's customers, but for staff. Secondly, the preservation policy was cleaned up to move certain technical components and related process changes to the preservation guidelines. We feel that that's a better place. We want to make sure the policy statement is high level, provides the roadmap, but doesn't get into the technical details as it does currently. So that was really the reason for making those revisions. This policy would not preclude CHFA from allowing prepayment of mortgage loans in furtherance of CHFA's mission upon board approval. So in other words, if loan documents currently allow prepayment of these loans, those would not be subject to the parameters that are outlined here. So in summary, staff is recommending the following parameters. So no multifamily loan can prepay prior to the 15th year following commencement of amortization. So when can they prepay? Prepayment would be permitted in full after 15 years by virtue of a refinance of that mortgage with CHFA subject to all applicable CHFA requirements, including the payment of a 1% fee. And then Additionally, for loans that are past 15 years, prepayment would be permitted in full after 20 years, subject to the satisfaction of all applicable requirements, and again, including payment of the 1% fee based on the outstanding principal balance. So to streamline the process, the CEO, executive director, would be given delegated authority to approve prepayment requests that are meeting the conditions of the proposed preservation policy. These conditions are outlined on page 2 of the preservation policy. I can just take a couple of minutes to just quickly highlight these for you. Again, prepayment would be subject to the 1% fee. New and refinance loans would require CHFA board approvals. They still have to abide by all of our requirements. Long-term affordability has to maintain, so it really depends on the type of regulatory agreement that is associated with the property. CHFA will also require maintenance of affordability for a minimum of 15 years following the prepayment under that modified extended commitment. So this is particularly important in areas where there are high costs. We want to ensure that that long-term affordability is not lost. Regulatory and programmatic oversight will continue. So this includes going out, doing, inspections, collecting certifications. So those requirements would remain in place throughout the end of the regulatory agreement or the extended use agreement. And then additionally, a lot of our projects have funding sources from HUD or the Department of Housing, so we want to make sure that those consents are obtained as part of approval. So again, the board would still be required would still see any new transactions or refinance, those would still come to the board. In instances where the CEO or the executive director does not exercise the authority to approve a prepayment request, or situations where facts deviate from the conditions outlined in the present preservation policy, those would still come to the board. There's other criteria that's outlined here. I'm not going to go through it, but these are additional factors that staff will consider. This goes into a little bit more detail in the guidelines. So we want to look at who the buyer is. We want to look at the condition of the property, what kind of work needs to be done. We want to look at the value of the property, the kind of financial rental subsidy that may be in place, and just any other factors to make sure that that they do contribute to the stability and feasibility of the transaction going forward. So that was a lot. So with that said, let me open it up to questions and any feedback that you may have for us.
So Masuda, before that, let's just, can I have a motion and we'll go on the discussion for any questions?
So moved.
Second, and I do have a comment.
Yeah, discussion. Go ahead, Greg.
So it's interesting because I look at this and I see the need for it. One of the things that jumps out, though, is where are we with the need for some type of consistency for, as we have in the criteria, show a lot of subjectivity, right? That you could go through and we can pinpoint different projects, different geographic areas. Does the board have any concern that the results are consistent for borrowers, that there's some expectation of consistency, or are we free to be all over the map, for example, with what we deem is appropriate?
So let me take a stab at answering the question. So in terms of consistency for the borrower, what we're proposing will actually provide much more clarity and transparency into the process that does not exist. As I mentioned, these prepayment requests have been approved by the board ad hoc. Our current prepayment language is written very broadly. So we feel that making this change is positive for the customers and certainly for staff. In terms of the consistency as far as if I'm understanding the question, each project is unique, right? They may have a different plan of finance. Some may have rental subsidy, some may not. Some will have LIHTC, some may not. So the plan of finance is going to vary significantly depending on how that property was initially set up and what makes sense for the preservation of that property going forward. At the same time, we also want to make sure that we use this as an opportunity to look at what the needs of the project are going forward. So if the project needs, renovation or improvements to reposition the property, then this is the time to discuss those matters with the owner and put together a plan that, again, repositions that property for long-term success. So let me pause there, Greg. I want to make sure I answered your question.
I'd like to actually offer a board perspective, Greg, too, to that. I think it's a very fair question you asked, but I think what I have experienced over time in terms of our deliberations here is that our mission is different than, than a bank's would be. And we have to take into account a greater range of factors because of that mission-driven nature of CHFA. And that actually, in tandem with what Masuda has already, walked through, the different nature of each project, I think over time that, for me, has led to a much higher comfort level with the fact that we do have to be more agile, if you will. And I think as long as every time we're able to explain why this decision might be different than a decision in a different and similar case, as long as we know why that is and that it's rooted in what we're trying to achieve, consistent with the mission of CHFA, I think that is where we have to be. But I appreciate very much the fact that you raised the question.
Any other comments? Thank you, Lisa.
I'll just say to that.
Greg, what was that?
I was just going to say that was very helpful, actually, too, because the point being, too, that these are so unique in so many ways, each and every circumstance and each and every loan, that it does force due diligence on our part and the thought process to be unique for each one of these. And as long as they're explained properly, we can do what's in the best interest of our mission. And I liked that explanation.
Thank you, Greg. Wendy?
Just a clarifying question for Ms. Soda. It seems to me that for any number of reasons, the board or this committee would still have some insight into these prepayments, but to the extent any one particular project fits nicely within these guidelines, is it conceivable that this committee would never see that or have oversight, and it would just be subject to the discretion of the director? Is that possible here?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, for example, for loans that are being refinanced with CHFA, or if there's a purchase and sale and that financing is occurring with CHFA, those transactions would come before mortgage committee and the board. So you would be approving those transactions. The situation that I can think of is, let's say we are allowing a prepayment which would be, if this policy approved, let's say it's after year 20. So then staff would follow the delegated approval process to make that recommendation to the executive director that it meets the requirements, and therefore, prepayment is approved under these conditions.
And in those instances, Masuda, how would we learn about that? Is there some process for later notification, just so that we're in the loop, not necessarily to weigh in, but just to keep abreast of any prepayments that, would not have come before us?
Yeah, that's good feedback. So we can definitely, as this policy gets finalized, we can consider some kind of a reporting in the board package or mortgage committee package that when a prepayment is approved under the delegated approval authority. However, if there's no additional financing attached to that transaction, again, as long as it meets the parameters that's been put in place, that those would be reported to the board. Anything that's outside of that, those would still come to the board because the delegated authority parameters are limited.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Shelley, are you still there? I cannot see you.
I am. I believe this is just for discussion purposes.
So this does not require an approval right now. This is just a discussion.
Yes.
Was that
correct? Yeah, we wanted this opportunity to solicit your feedback this morning, and we will come back at the March board meeting and present the final policy.
Okay. Thank you. I thought that it required a vote. So let's move on to...
Cindy Butts, who's not here today, or not in Mortgage Committee, I don't think, had a couple of questions that she wanted to ask about the policy. I don't want to ask them for her, but in the event that she doesn't, I could bring them up right now, and then maybe we could discuss them at board. But her questions were concerning a couple of, if you can scroll down, actually, no, it's right there. It's on this page where it says that this policy and how it works with other policies enables new capital investment in energy savings, environmentally sound property improvements, and she was just curious about how that would work. And another concern or question of hers was around the last bullet, which is continuing to provide low-income families with affordable housing. And her concern there was really that, that there should be a vehicle for people to be able to escape poverty, in the sense that, that some of this, the fact that we're creating affordability is great, but that in effect the system sort of reinforces that people, sometimes end up having to stay in those units for a long time, and that it sort of perpetuates that cycle of the annual recertifications of income, and whether there's a way to consider affordability differently in certain areas that may be in need of more income mixing or that are gentrifying, and would CHFA consider affordability and the question of affordability, extending it or maintaining it differently in certain instances. So I'm paraphrasing what she said. She may bring it up at the board meeting, but I wanted to put it out there because I'm aware of her concerns.
Okay. Any other comments? Our last item is the approval of the minutes for Mortgage Committee, the minutes of January 28th. If I can have a motion.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Discussion? Okay, Shelley, do your job.
Wendy Clark?
Yes.
Kylie Goslin?
Yes.
Keith Titowitz?
I abstain.
Kayla Mascara-Bruno?
Abstain. Yeah, I was not present.
Lisa Pepper-Bates?
Present, but perhaps I wasn't. So I'm sure, Shelley, you must be right, and then I should abstain. Apologies.
Greg Ugalde?
Yes.
Three abstentions.
We have a quorum, Shelley?
Yes, we do.
Motion carries. Thank you. Any other comments? Can I have a motion to adjourn? Just say aye.
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 Thank you. So we are on time for the board meeting. Thank you very much.
Very good.
Goodbye.